Good day to you all, and for my very first video, might as well show my Doctor Who collection.
And hello once again. So this is the 5-year anniversary of this very YouTube channel. So, and also I've completed my Doctor Who collection. I actually completed it in February. So today for the 5th anniversary, I'm gonna go through my entire Doctor Who DVD collection. I will try to give my opinions on each story, because just dragging them out and saying the covers very boring. But so this video might be an eternity long, but we'll see. Anyway, so we will get started. Okay, so let's get started. Lost in Time, the Lost in Time collection. This is all the orphaned episodes from Largely Missing Stories. If you're a fan of archive television, you've got to have this. It's a must-have. It's a bit redundant now because a lot of the episodes have made their way to DVD, but it's still a fantastic set. Now we start on with the stories properly with An Unearthly Child. I pretty much agree with everyone that the first part is absolutely fantastic and the rest is a bit shit. I don't hate the rest of the story, it's just a bit naff. The Daleks, the first Dalek story, absolutely fantastic. I love this one. And Terry Nation loved this one so much he pretty much recycled the same script through most of his tenure. But yeah, this one's fantastic. It does get a little bit long at 7 parts, but other than that, it's brilliant. Edge of Destruction, oh dear. An hour of the Doctor and crew whinging at each other. It's a whinge fest, pretty much. I hate this one. Ironically, the 2-part where they were trying to save money, for the more expensive Marco Polo, that one survives, but Marco Polo is missing. Here is Marco Polo. This is the loose cannon reconstructions burnt onto disc. I did a whole video about these. I've subsequently put them in the correct silver cases. But yeah, Marco Polo is fantastic. Strangely, there's condensed reconstruction on the Edge of Destruction DVD, which I thought was absolutely terrible. I just was bored stiff, shitless throughout it. But when I actually watched the full version, well, I say the full version, the reconstructed one, it was just fantastic. I love this one. This one's brilliant. The Keys of Marinus, it is a bit ambitious having 2 really expensive stories together. This one's kind of like a prototype for The Key to Time. But this one's a load of fun. Really not a lot of people talk about other than its bad qualities. But if you look past that, it's a fun story. The Aztecs, much loved Hartnell historical. One I need to watch again because I do remember not entirely connecting with this one. I think it's okay, but it's just not brilliant. The Sensorites, which if Edge of Destruction didn't exist, this one would definitely be the worst of season 1. It's just incredibly boring. At 6 parts, it feels like it's treble that length. The Sensorites are a really interesting character, and I love the first part, but I don't know what the hell happened there. But anyway, I love the first part, but the rest, no, it just did nothing for me. The Reign of Terror, quite underrated historical. Not a lot of people talk about this one. This is one I do really enjoy. Planet of Giants, one that again not a lot of people talk about, but one is really fun. It does work well as 3 parts of it. It would be interesting, to see the original versions of parts 3 and 4 before they were condensed. But yeah, this one's really interesting. And this one was supposed to be the first story after Unearthly Child, but they decided to go with the caveman story. The Dalek Invasion of Earth. Fucking hell. I was just bored. Couldn't get into this one. It's really cheap as well. I mean, it has some interesting aspects to it, but it's just and I can appreciate what it did for the series, but no, it's just a bit naff. The Rescue, the introduction of Vicky, Susan departed at the end of Dark Invasion of Earth. This one I think could have worked quite well as a 4-parter, because it's just kind of a bit lacking as a 2-parter, but it's a really good 2-parter. I'd recommend it. The Romans, a first for Doctor Who, the first sort of comedic story, and this one's a load of fun. I really do enjoy this one. The Web Planet, a controversial story. It was very ambitious for its time, and you can kind of tell, you know, they couldn't quite pull it off. I think I would have called this one underrated if it was shorter. Then I probably would have called it underrated. But I think because it's a bit too long at 6 parts, just no, it's hard to recommend that one. The Crusade, another reconstruction. This one really should have gotten its own DVD release, because I like the surviving episodes, but I could not get into the reconstructed ones. It was better than watching them on Lost in Time when you just had the soundtracks, but really, other than that, no. The Space Museum, one which surprisingly was intended to be a parody of a Doctor Who serial, but this one, unironically, is actually quite good. It kind of does fall apart near the end, but other than that, it's really quite good. London 1965. The Chase. A silly Dalek story, but one I really do enjoy. This one is just daft as hell. The first sort of comedy Dalek story, you know, you can kind of tell this early on they stopped taking Daleks seriously. The Time Meddler. Absolutely fantastic. Probably my favourite Hartnell story. The first time you get to meet another person from the Doctor's race. Not the Time Lords, because this was before the Time Lords were established. But it's just, I really like this one. Yeah, it's just Pete Butterworth's fantastic as the meddling monk. Galaxy 4, another reconstruction, and yeah, this one's alright. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. It's just pretty good. It's got quite an interesting concept. Mission to the Unknown, a rarity for Doctor Who because it's the only 1-parter, unless you count stuff like the 5 Doctors. This one's okay. This one was intended to be the prequel to Dalek's Master Plan. It's an interesting watch. The Mythmakers, the introduction to the short-lived companion of Katarina, because she only appeared in this one and Dalek's Master Plan. This one, I don't remember that much about this one, but I think it was alright. The Daleks Master Plan, 12 parts long, but I don't think it drags that much. It does kind of lose it slightly near the end, because the first 6 parts were written by Terry Nation and the rest were written by Dennis Spooner. I think it does slightly lose it when Spooner came in to write it, and that out of nowhere Christmas episode, what the fuck was that all about? I don't dislike the Feast of Stephen, but it's just but you can tell it's just utterly pointless. But I suppose possibly for the time, you know, they had to include it. And also, it's the only episode which has no chance of getting recovered because they never transferred it to film. Because when they sold the story abroad, they sold it as an 11-parter. The Massacre, or the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, as I've used on this cover, I did actually print off a reversible sleeve, so you can call it just the Massacre. But yeah, the Massacre, a really one which a lot of people forget about. I think a lot of the missing ones a lot of people forget kind of exist, which is a shame really, because this one's actually really quite good. It's quite dark, you know, for a Doctor Who story. But yeah, I do really like that one. The Ark. Would I quite like, actually. It kind of has a different... It kind of does feel like two stories sort of glued together, but kind of not really, because it all takes place around the same planet. You know, like, the first half takes place in the past, and then the second half takes place in the future. And you can kind of tell this one predicted COVID in a way, because it's all about, you know, I think it's Dodo who brings a virus to this space colony. But yeah, this one's really good, really underrated. The Celestial Toy Maker, which, if there was a candidate for one to get animated, this one would definitely be it. This one, I do really enjoy this one. Michael Goff is brilliant as the Toy Maker, and I do praise the Loose Cannon team, you know, because there was very little left of the story, and it's a really visual experience. But yeah, this is one I'd highly recommend. Part of me thinks it won't get animated because it's it's a tiny bit racist, but you know, if you can look past that. The Gunfighters, an absolutely daft as hell story, but one I do enjoy. Auntie Mabel singing Barrett at the Last Chance Saloon got really grating really fast. But I'd say kind of, if you ignore that, you know, it's pretty good. The Savages, the departure of Stephen. Stephen was introduced in Time Meddler. Yeah, this one was alright. The War Machines, one which surprisingly is quite underrated. This one kind of feels like what the Third Doctor would become, you know, the Doctor joining up with the military, you know, on Earth in, you know, modern day, or I say modern day, late 60s. But yeah, this one's really good. The Smugglers, I liked the first part, but kind of after that it kind of just lost me. And then the final ever William Hartnell story, because, you know, by this time, like, his health was deteriorating. So they came up with the idea for regeneration. And that story is The 10th Planet. I hope they do find episode 4 of this, because episode 4 is a landmark piece of television, because it was the first ever regeneration. But yeah, this one is just... I do really like this one. It's not the strongest Cyberman story, but I do really like the Cybermen design. You know, the Mondasian Cybermen, even though in this they do look really quite clunky. But I'd say this one's really good. This one's recommended from me. Now we move on to the second Doctor, Patrick Troughton, who is possibly my favourite Doctor out of the lot. It's really hard to pick. It's either Troughton or Pertwee, who are my favourites. Now we start off with a brilliant story, Power of the Daleks. I've got the original DVD release of this, which was the first DVD I ever pre-ordered, funnily enough. This one is fantastic. Probably the best Dalek story of the 60s. It kind of shows sort of a different aspect, the more manipulative side of the Daleks, which we kind of never really saw in any of the Terry Nation scripts. But the animation, yeah, is quite clunky. I won't be getting the special edition because, to be honest, the animation only looks slightly better to me, and to be honest, like, the new special features and stuff don't really intrigue me enough, so I won't bother upgrading. The Highlanders, another reconstruction. The introduction of Jamie, and it's alright. This is the last pure historical we'd get for many years, because kind of the pure historicals weren't catching people, and I think the pure historicals should have stayed in the Hartnell era. But yeah, this one, I'd say it's alright. It's not terrible, but it's not that great either. Ugh. The Underwater Menace. The story isn't that bad. I've seen worse, but yeah, the DVD release is shockingly shite. You know, just, they should have, you know, because of how long they delayed it for, they should have, just done the animation, so they just released it as cheaply and as quickly as possible to shut fans up. And this one still commands a pretty high price, which is just criminal. The Moon Base, a great Cyberman story. Yeah, this one is just fantastic. The Macro Terror, one which has gotten a lot more praise since it was animated. I'm not a big fan of these covers, the animated ones, not because it's drawn, but because they just look really bland. It's just a picture of the Doctor, there's really nothing there. I think probably Fury from the Deep has one of the better covers, but this one, I absolutely love this story. This is just fantastic. It's 1984 with giant crabs. What's not to love? I think the animation, because of the way the macro portrayed in it, they are, portrayed as, because in the original television story they looked really shite. They were big, bulky, they could barely move, and I believe that was one of the things that made them strain their relationship with Shawcraft Models, who did the model work in pretty much the entirety of the Hartnell era. And then kind of after the Faceless ones, they pretty much did all the special effects in-house. Yeah, this one's fantastic. The Faceless ones, not as good as when I saw the 2 surviving episodes on Lost in Time set. The rest of the story wasn't really that good, but I'd still say this one's pretty good. It's really quite enjoyable. Evil of the Daleks, a reconstruction. I think this one might be animated next. I do really like this story. The last Dalek story you'd have for many years. It's just generally a good one, but not as good as Power. Nowhere near as good as Power. The Tomb of the Cybermen, the first black and white one I saw, I really do like this one. This one probably is my favourite of the 60s Cyberman stories. Cybermen, all the characters, it's brilliant. I think this one, when they found it in the 90s, it wasn't as highly regarded as when it was broadcast, but now more people have come out and said, it's pretty good when they viewed it on their own merits, and rightly so. It's fantastic. The Abominable Snowmen. I don't mind this one, surprisingly. This is another reconstruction. The Yeti are, of course, way too cute, to be taken seriously. But I liked when the direction it was going in, but it kind of lost me near the end. The Ice Warriors, which is alright. I'm not really a fan of the Ice Warrior stories. I can't really think of that many properly good ones from the classic era. I think with this one, Victoria in particular, she was just really, really annoying in this one, and it was just dragged as hell. The Enemy of the World. Of course, a great story. This one finally got its reputation it deserved when it was recovered back in 2013. And yeah, I'd say this one is a great story, great sort of espionage story, and probably the best, story of the Doctor playing multiple roles. The Web of Fear, one which was regarded as classic for the longest time before it was recovered, and is still regarded as classic. I prefer Enemy of the World to the Web of Fear, but this one is still absolutely fantastic. Fury from the Deep. Apparently a lot of people found the animation for this one really disappointing, and I can agree it kind of loses a bit of its creepiness, that the audio had, the audio release's reputation had, but it's still a really good story, and I don't mind the animation despite its flaws. This one I've put in a proper silver case. The Wheel in Space, easily the worst Cyberman story of the 60s. This one it didn't know what the hell it was doing. It was just, the plot was extremely convoluted and way too complicated, and it felt really contrived as well. You know, contrived reason to get like the Doctor involved. But it's not awful, but it's just not that good either. The Dominators. Yes, I know its politics are very badly screwed up, but if you ignore that, it's an alright story. I don't mind this crap. It's kind of a guilty pleasure. I do enjoy this one. The Mind Robber, of course, an actual proper really good story, really creative, and I'm glad this one was kept because this one wouldn't have worked without the visuals. But yeah, this is just overall a really fun story and definitely a great introduction to the Second Doctor. The Invasion, the introduction of Unit, and this one's really good. Is it a bit long at 8 parts? Yeah, probably, but you know, it's still a really good story. The character Kevin Stoney plays in this is fantastic. Tobias Vaughan, he also played Mavic Chen in Dark Master Plan. The Crotons, really unmemorable. This one was the first script by Robert Holmes, and it's just, don't remember much about this one. It's just, it's there, you watch it, you enjoy it, you move on with your life. The Seeds of Death, probably the best Ice Warrior story from the classic era. Although, to be honest, I don't really remember that much about this one. Do a rewatch. The Space Pirates, the last one, you know, that is pretty much missing in its, well, nearly its entirety except episode 2. Easily the worst of the Second Doctor era. It's just, nothing happens in it. It's just really boring. It's just basically filler. I didn't mind episode 2, but the rest, no, forget it. And then we get to the War Games. What a fantastic story this is. The introduction to the Time Lords, and a lot of people say episode 10 is the best, and it is the best part, and they just say everything else is crap. I disagree. I think even without episode 10 it would have still been one of the best stories of the Second Doctor's era. And it's 10 parts long, but it doesn't really feel that long at all. You know, I could probably get through, if I had the time, I could have probably got through it all in one go. So now we move on to the John Pertwee era, who is probably my second favourite Doctor, though it's hard to pick. He might be my first, might be my second. So we start off with Spearhead from Space, which is one which has often been hailed as a classic. It's not my favourite of the Pertwee era, or even my favourite of season 7, but you know, it's still a pretty good story. An actual good jumping on point, you know, to classic Who. This one was the first to have a lot of things. First Third Doctor one, the first Earthbound one, the first one made in colour as well. Yeah, this one's just really good. Definitely worth a watch. Doctor and the Silurians, yes, that is the title, because, I don't know, there's some confusion over the script. This one is just an underrated gem. This one is, it's absolutely fantastic. Definitely got a lot of, you know, really great sort of themes in this, and it's more kind of slightly more political themes and like more themes aimed towards adults in the Pertwee era, which is what I quite like. You know, we're kind of moving away from like sort of the children's stuff in the Pertwee era, but this one is really good. The Ambassadors of Death, one I need to go back to, but I do remember really liking, you know, the theme of this one. You know, the fact that the aliens, you know, there's this aliens, you know, who come down and basically the humans think they're the villains, and usually in a story like this they would be the villains, but they're not. This one's really good. The recolonisation, I'm not gonna lie, is really rough. I mean this one probably took a really long time to come out on DVD because of a lot of problems they had, you know, getting the colour restored, and it's passable, but it's just not that good. It could have been better. Inferno, regarded as as one of the best stories, and yeah, I completely agree. This one is just fantastic. I think it is a bit long at 7 parts. I think part 7 probably could have been cut down a little bit more, and then, you know, it could have been like a 6-parter, but it was still absolutely fantastic. Terror of the Autons, which was the introduction to the Master, and the best Master, Roger Delgado. I'm going to be a bit controversial with this one. I actually prefer this one to Spearhead. I think Spearhead was a better Doctor Who story, but this one's a better Auton story. Heavily, very, very controversial when it came out, because you had like a troll doll, you know, coming to life and killing people, like 17 odd years before Chucky. You also had, you know, an Auton disguised as a policeman as well. It's just really quite, you know, amazing stuff. Really quite dark stuff as well. This is Doctor Who at its best. This is one of those stories where you hide behind the sofa. This is that story. The Mind of Evil. A fantastic story, this one. I absolutely love this one. It has a lot of it takes a lot of influence from A Clockwork Orange, you know, with the, you know, using weird sci-fi, you know, to reform criminals. Although this one's far less explicit. And this one kind of has a different like plot to it. But this one is really good as well. It's fantastic. The Claws of Axos, a fun story. I don't mind this one. One which a lot of people seem to overlook, but this is one I quite enjoy. I really like the Autons as well, and the Axons as well, and, you know, the fact that the Doctor and the Master, you know, actually, you know, team up together, you know, to fight the greater evil, which is something I always kind of like. You never see that with any of like hero and villain partnerships. Colony in Space, unmemorable. The Master, I do remember he kind of came in at the last minute. He didn't need to be there. He was just there, pretty much. I mean, he was there throughout the entirety of Season 8, which a lot of people have criticised Season 8 because the Master is in every single story. And I like that. You know, I absolutely love Roger Delgado's Master, but this one, no. The Demons, one I rewatched recently. The Demons, I can see why it's a classic, and all the elements come together, but I think it kind of lost me a bit by like episode 3. It's just a bit. There's a story, there's better Pertwee stories I'd go for over this one, but this one's still alright. Like 3 out of 10 or something. No, not 3 out of 10, sorry, 3 out of 5. Day of the Daleks, the first colour Dalek story, unless you count the Peter Cushing films or their appearance on Out of the Unknown. This one I think has developed a bit more of a cult following over the years. The story is actually pretty good, but, you know, the budget really let it down. The version I've watched is the original version. There is a special edition on here with a lot of like visual effects changes, which I need to watch. I've heard that one's really good. Yeah, you could tell he didn't have really the budget because they only had like 3 Daleks to play with. And the Daleks didn't need to be in it. Yeah, I know a story called Day of the Daleks shouldn't have had the Daleks in it. You know, they were just written in because, you know, I believe they just wanted to boost viewing figures. And it worked because this one got really high viewing figures. The Curse of Peladon, and again, another unmemorable one. I liked some of it, but no, it didn't really do much for me. The Sea Devils, Season 9 has been, you know, is probably the weakest season of the Pertwee era, but I think a lot of fans make an exception of this one. This one was really, really great. The Master in top form. And yeah, I just really like the Sea Devils, even though it is basically the Silurians, but, you know, instead of living underground, they live under the sea. The Mutants, underrated. It has a lot of problems production-wise, including, I think it was episode 5's cliffhanger, which is easily the most embarrassing cliffhanger in all of Classic Who, due to just how shit the green screen is. But I'd say if you look past a lot of the production issues, it's actually pretty good, a really quite strong story. The Time Monster, considered the worst Pertwee story. I must be on drugs because I actually quite like this one. It's 6 parts long and yet it doesn't drag for me, and it's really entertaining despite its glaring problems. The Three Doctors, the return, the first multi-doctor story and the first anniversary story. This one's a load of fun. Really only watch this for John Pertwee and Patrick Troughton like playing off each other. You know, their chemistry is just perfect. And this was unfortunately the last appearance of William Hartnell on television because his health was deteriorated even further. And he only died about 2 years after this was broadcast, sadly. And on this one, they had to contrive a reason why he couldn't actually be in the TARDIS, so they had him like stuck in like the time vortex or something, and talking to him and just sitting on a chair reading off a keyboard. Carnival Monsters, a quite forgotten one, but one I really do enjoy. One of my favourite Robert Holmes scripts, actually, which is The Last Thing You'd Expect Anyone to Say. This one I just really like. It's a really clever, fun little script, and actually the closest thing we'd ever get to a Pertwee Cyberman story, because we didn't get one in the Pertwee era. Pertwee was skipped with the Cybermen. Frontier in Space, one that has developed a bit of a cult following over time. A lot more people have come out and said, they really like this one. Another unmemorable one. Sadly, this was the last appearance of Roger Delgado in Doctor Who, because he was involved in a car accident shortly after this was broadcast, and that was one of the reasons Pertwee decided to leave. There was going to be a story called, I think it was like The Final Game or something, and it was supposed to be like a duel between John Pertwee and Roger Delgado Master, and the Master was supposed to die, but that unfortunately didn't come into being. Planet of the Daleks. Yes, it recycles the same script as the first Dalek story, but I don't care. It's a load of fun. That's it, pretty much. I don't mind Planet of the Daleks. It's probably objectively the worst Dalek story of the Pertwee era, but I don't know. A lot of the Pertwee Dalek stories I've kind of grown to over the years. The Green Death, the departure of Joe Grant, and definitely a really good one. Definitely well worth a watch. And actually, the Joe Grant departure, have your opinion on your favourite companion departure, but easily my favourite is Joe's departure. The Time Warrior, the introduction of Sarah Jane Smith, who, I'm going to be honest, I think is overrated. She's not awful, but, and, may Elizabeth Sladen rest in peace, but it's just, she was annoying. She just screamed all the bloody time. I think the only reason why she became like the most popular companion was because she served as companion the longest and was there during the golden era. But this one, I'd say it's a fantastic story. One of my favourites, actually. The Sontaran in this, who I think was called Lynx, he's fantastic. That's how you write a Sontaran. It's just fantastic stuff. Invasion of the Dinosaurs. Probably my favourite Malcolm Hulke script, actually. This one is a really good mystery story, but you have to look past just how fucking abysmal the dinosaurs are. I mean, holy shit. The puppets are absolutely terrible. And apparently they were even laughable at the time. Yeah, if you look past the dinosaurs, you can kind of watch it on both levels. If you want a pretty good story, you've got that. But if you want comedy value, you've got that as well because of the dinosaurs. Death to the Daleks, another silly Dalek story, one I need to go back to, but I do remember enjoying this one. The Daleks were absolutely useless in it. The Monster of Peladon, a bit like Curse of Peladon, just unmemorable, but it was alright. And then Planet of the Spiders, the final Pertwee story, one that felt probably the most like a Pertwee story. It had a lot of action in it. This one probably is one of the weaker Pertwee stories, unfortunately, but you know, I still enjoy it. It's pretty good fun. I think episode 3 was literally just one massive chase scene. So yeah, that was the Pertwee era. And so now we move on to the Tom Baker era. The most popular and most iconic of the classic Doctors. And one of my favourites, but not my favourite. I think his era kind of went downhill a bit near the end, but we'll get started. First off, we have Robot. Yes, it feels like a Pertwee story, but I quite like this one. This one's really good. Tom Baker, I think by like Ark in Space and stuff, like he'd really like got his foot into the role, but this one is really good. I do enjoy this one. The Ark in Space. Again, another good one. He is one of the more iconic of the Fourth Doctor stories because it's got Bubble Wrap Man. But yeah, this one's good. This sort of starts off the Loose Nerva trilogy. The Sontaran Experiment. One I actually rewatched, and I actually think this one's quite good. Actually, I think this might be my favourite two-parter. I prefer Time Warrior over this, but this one's still really good. This one was filmed entirely in Dartmoor, and this was the one where Tom Baker actually, I believe he broke his collarbone during filming. Genesis of the Daleks. One of my favourite stories. It's a bit cliche to say it now because it's probably the most popular, but it's really, really great. The introduction of Davros, easily my favourite version of portrayal of Davros. And as a story, it's just fantastic. I love this one. And then we get to Revenge of the Cybermen. There hadn't been a Cyberman story for about 7 years by this point, and yeah, it's a bit naff. I don't hate it, but no, it just did nothing for me whatsoever. Although it had some like comedy aspects to it. Terror of the Zygons, one which surprisingly took a very long time to get released on DVD because this came out in 2013. This one's fantastic. You know, it's a credit to Robert Banks Stewart that he was able to write, you know, a monster who would soon become like a massive icon of Doctor Who, and yet he was and yet they were a one-off until like the modern series got them. But yeah. Planet of Evil. The set design of this is fantastic. I think it was shot at Elstree, I think. And the story, it's not that bad. Honestly, I'd say it's pretty underrated. Give it a watch. Pyramids of Mars. This was one I used to consider quite overrated. It just didn't do that much for me, but upon a rewatch, yeah, I finally get it now. It's actually a really good story. Sutek is a fantastic villain, although episode 1 has the most ridiculous cliffhanger in Classic Who, because what Marcus is wearing, it's a really intense cliffhanger, but it's ruined by what the hell Marcus is wearing, because you can't, if you look at the cliffhanger, you can't tell me he's not wearing a massive unrolled condom. God, the sakes, who the hell designed that and why are they allowed to live? The Android Invasion, a quite underrated one. Is it the weakest of season 13? Maybe, but you know, I do quite like this one. I preferred episode 1 to the rest because I think it kind of lost it a bit, but I liked like the mystery stuff surrounding it. The Brain of Morbius, one I watched again recently, and it's actually pretty good. I don't mind this one. This is one which I think a lot more people have been critical of, but this is one I do quite enjoy. The Seeds of Doom, another great story. Is it a bit long? Yes, it's a tiny bit long. It's 6 parts, but it's still absolutely fantastic. And one of the ones May Whitehouse had a field day over. The Mask of Mandragora. This was the script that made Elizabeth Sladen stay on, you know, to Doctor Who for an episode longer, but I don't know why, because this one's just... it had a lot of great imagery, but it was just a lot of wasted potential and was just a bit naff. Next one is The Hand of Fear, the final Sarah Jane story. It's not bad, it's not that good either, it just exists. The Deadly Assassin, this was the first story I ever watched, and this was a story I used to consider absolutely overrated. I couldn't stand it, but upon rewatch, it's actually really good. I really like it. I marathoned all the Tom Baker stories not too long ago, and this one was one I actually genuinely grew to. I really like this one. The Face of Evil, the introduction of one of my favourite companions, Leela. I don't know why Leela couldn't have been like the iconic companion Sarah Jane was, but this one, it exists. It's one of those stories where it's there, you've got it, but it's just not that memorable. The Robots of Death, fantastic. I really, really love this one. This is one I've always enjoyed. Oh, The Talons of Weng Chiang. It's really racist. It's basically that episode of Father Ted, but without any of the irony. But this one, it's actually a really good story, but yes, it is ridiculously racist. God. But yeah, this one's a pretty good story. Horror of Fanged Rock.
My brother is wearing the other one. But it's dirty. That's what you got footprints on it.
I'm sorry, I don't know what the hell happened just then. But yeah, Horror of Fanged Rock. I know I'm going to get killed for saying this, but I'm not a fan of this one. It has a good atmosphere to it, and it definitely feels like a great Gothic horror story. And there's a great story there, but it's just execution-wise, I couldn't get into it. The Invisible Enemy, basically Inner Space, about 10 years before Inner Space. This one's actually a pretty good story, honestly. It's really, really stupid, but I'd say if you can look past that, it's actually a pretty good story. Image of the Fendal, Gothic horror one. Just generic Gothic horror, you know, take it or leave it. The Sunmakers, ignoring the fact that basically Robert Holmes wrote this because he was pissed off about having to pay taxes, even though he ironically was getting funded using tax money. This one's actually a pretty good story. This is one I really do quite enjoy. It's a lot of fun. Underworld. The script isn't awful, but the execution lets it down. The execution is abysmal. Easily one of the weakest stories of the Fourth Doctor era. The Invasion of Time. The really shit departure of Leela, but I'd say this is a pretty good story. I didn't mind it being 6 parts. I didn't mind the whole thing, even though it is 2 stories super glued together. Then we move on to the Key to Time season, starting off with the Ribos Operation, which, alright. It's alright, I guess. It's just there. There's other stories I would rather watch over this one. The Pirate Planet, one which a lot of people have come out and said it's terrible. It's not. It's actually really quite good. I really do enjoy this one. Douglas Adams, you know, doing what he does best. It's just really quite fun. The Stones of Blood, one I quite enjoyed, surprisingly. Another overlooked one. The Androids of Tara, joint with Pirate Planet, has been my favourite part. This is just a good story. I do enjoy this one. The Power of Krull, easily the stupidest part. But I'd say if you can look past the fact that it's about a giant squid monster that eats parts of the Key to Time, it's actually pretty good. No, I shouldn't say pretty good. It's all right. You know, take it or leave it. The Armageddon Factor. unmemorable again, but I absolutely despise the ending. Not just to the Keith Times season, but not just to this episode, but the whole Keith Times season in general. It was just a complete cop-out. I hated the ending. But the story, it's fine. Destiny of the Daleks. I always say that, you know, usually like the really cheap looking stories are usually the ones which are overly ambitious. This one isn't ambitious at all, but it still looks like arse. Yeah, why the hell is it so cheap? Because, I mean, it was the first story of the season, and it was a Dalek story. So there's no excuse. And the story's just crap. It's easily the weakest Dalek story of the entire classic series. And easily, and sadly, the last script Terry Nation ever wrote for Doctor Who. I didn't mind David Goodison as Davros, but he was no Michael Wisher. City of Death, a classic. This one is considered one of the better stories of the latter half of the Tom Baker era. But, you know, this one's just, it deserved its praise, it's fantastic. Creature from the Pit. Easily has probably one of the most inappropriate scenes in any TV show, not just in any kids TV show, but in any TV show in general. Yeah, but if you can look past the absurdity of it, it's actually quite an underrated story. I quite enjoy this one actually, as a story, but you have to ignore, you know, that just the thing, the titular Creature from the Pit. Nightmare of Eden, which is just, to be honest, I can't remember anything about this one. I must have been a bit tired during this one, but I do remember that on the cover, you know, you can see like the faces like poking through the masks. I never actually noticed that in the actual story, so I think the artist, I think it was Lee Binding who did the cover to this one, was probably quite exaggerating it. The Horns of Nimon has probably one of the most over-the-top villains in him. His acting is just insane, but it's actually not that bad. I've seen worse. I've seen better, but I've definitely seen worse. I don't dislike this one like everybody else does. Shudder. I have the original version, which has the Tom Baker sort of linking bits. I'm not overly interested in getting the animated version, but if it was completed, would it have been regarded as one of the best? I think when compared to stuff like Genesis of the Daleks, no, but when compared to the last season, it's probably the best part. Yeah. The Leisure Hive. Fucking hell. I hate this one. It's based on this science called tachyonics, and you have to have a fucking degree in it to figure out what the hell's going on. But, and as a story on its own, it's just really, really boring. I was just bored stiffless. Meglos, easily the goofiest part of season 18. This is one I surprisingly don't mind. Everybody hates this story except me. I really do quite enjoy this one. Now we get to the E-Space trilogy with Full Circle. One I don't mind. I don't hate this one. I think it's not great, but it's actually pretty good. It's actually a really quite good story. It's not perfect, but you know, you could do worse. State of Decay, which definitely feels like one of the Hinchcliffe era stories. It wouldn't have felt out of place. And it's got vampires, for God's sakes, but it's a really quite good story. You know, it's a really quite... I do enjoy this one. It's good fun. Warrior's Gate, easily the most convoluted out of all Classic Who. It's pretentious. I've never had to say that about Doctor Who, but I feel it applies to this one. It is pretentious as hell. It's too ambitious. it thinks it's smarter than it actually is. I think that's the best way you can describe it. The Keeper of Traken, which is pretty good. I do think... I don't think it's the best of season 18, but I still quite enjoyed it. And then the final ever Tom Baker story, Logopolis. Well, I don't hate this one like a lot of other people do, but it's just a bit forgettable, to be honest with you. Quite sad, you know, for easily the most iconic Doctor, you know, that his last season was that his final story was a bit rough. But yeah. So now we move on to the Peter Davison era. Peter Davison is probably my least favourite of the classic Doctors. He's not terrible, but there were just other Doctors I preferred. So we start off with Castrovalva, which I don't mind. It did kind of lose me a little bit when they, you know, got to Castrovalva, but other than that, it was okay. 4 to Doomsday, which was fine enough. Had some interesting ideas in it. Kinder, really psychedelic. I'm not a fan of this one. It's a bit overrated, but I don't hate it. Don't hate it, don't love it. The Visitation, one I need to go back to. I do remember thinking this one was pretty decent. Sort of pseudo historical. Black Orchid, a nice little two-parter. The first pure historical since the Highlanders. But yeah, this one's okay. It's not for everyone, but you know, I don't mind it. Earthshock, the return of the Cybermen since Revenge of the Cybermen about 7 years prior. And it's the massive shock that the Cybermen have returned, even though they're on the front cover. Fuck's sake. But yeah, this one is fantastic. Easily the best Cyberman story since the invasion. Everybody knows that. Time Flight. I don't... It's a guilty pleasure. This one is kind of so bad it's funny. In a way, because I mean, you get like the master, you know, caked in makeup, like incredibly stereotypical makeup. We go, oh, I'm Chinese. it's just... It had a good idea behind it, but it's just the execution of it was terrible. But it's kind of so bad it's funny. If you're drunk, put it on. It's a good laugh. Arc of Infinity, surprisingly, one I don't dislike. I thought this one was okay. I think it's just a bit average, you know, but it's not terrible as everybody says it is. Snake Dance, I prefer this to Kinder. It's not amazing, but it's fine. Interesting fact, this was Martin Clunes' TV debut. That's a piece of trivia for you. Now we move on to the Black Guardian trilogy with Mordred Undead, The Return of the Brigadier, and this is usually the best part of the trilogy. I really do like Mordred Undead. Terminus, or Terminal Boredom. Yeah, this one's crap. A really shit departure for Nyssa, I've not really been talking about the companions that much, but you know, Nyssa is probably one of the better companions, you know, to come out of the, you know, the latter half of the series. But yeah, this one's just boring. Enlightenment, it's fun. It's fun. I don't mind this one. The second appearance of Linda Barron in Doctor Who. The first one was, of course, the annoying Ballot at the Last Chance saloon singer in The Gunfighters. The King's Demons, the introduction to the weird chameleon. Chameleon is worth googling on his own because he's just really quite an interesting idea for a companion. Yeah, this one's a decent two-parter. It's not one of my favourite ones, but it's still pretty good. The Five Doctors, of course, the magnum. Well, when I say magnum opus, it's probably the most famous of the Doctor Who stories. Or it's more the 5.5 Doctors or something, because William Hartnell had passed away by this point, so it was Richard Hurndall who played him, and Tom Baker. They reused footage from Sharda, because he didn't want to be involved. But I'd still say it's enjoyable enough, even though it has very, very, very glaring problems. So I probably would say I prefer the Three Doctors over this, but it's pretty good, pretty enjoyable. Warriors of the Deep. Terrible. No, I don't want to say terrible, because it's not really that bad of a story, but it's definitely the production lets it down, because this one was butchered by our old friend Michael Grade, and it had quite a lot of problems. Like the Merker costume was just ridiculous, and even the most stark classic Who fan like me can't defend it. Yeah, but yeah, Warriors of the Deep. The Awakening, actually surprisingly a pretty good two-parter. I didn't mind this one. It's one of those ones which is a lot of people don't talk about, but I enjoy it. Frontiers, quite a more of a dark story. He's sort of getting more into the darker stuff in the Peter Davison era. But yeah, this one is really underrated. Resurrection of the Daleks, a story I need to go back to. I saw this was one of the first ones I watched, and to be honest, I wasn't overly keen on it. I think now I've watched more like the darker sort of stories, I think, I might appreciate this one more on a rewatch. Planet of Fire, basically an excuse to kill off Chameleon. Yeah, this one's alright. It's not... Actually, no, this one's pretty good. The Caves of Andrewzani, it's really good, but it's just a bit overrated. I might have to watch it again, but it has a great concept and a lot of great ideas, but to be honest, there's just other stories I prefer over this one. So now we move on to Colin Baker, a Doctor who's probably worst affected in the entire series. Starting off with an infamous story, The Twin Dilemma. Absolutely dreadful. To be honest, it's not even... I think with only the exception of a few lines, it's not really so bad it's funny. It's just a bit boring, It's just really, really stupid, but it's just really kind of annoying stupid as well. And Colin Baker's character, the Doctor, I get what they were going for, but the result is just a complete arse. And this, they tried something new. They did this at the end of season 21. So they should have made Caves of Andrewzani season 21 and then pushed this to season 22. Now we move into season 22 with the much better Attack of the Cybermen, with some really good good Cyberman story. Vengeance on Vamros, easily the greatest Colin Baker story. I really do love this one. Got amazing themes. The Mark of the Rani, the closest thing to a pseudo-historical. It's alright. It's not great, but it's watchable. The Two Doctors, brilliant because Patrick Troughton comes back. And this one, I think, is actually pretty good. I do really like this one. Time Lash. Possibly the worst story of the entire classic era. I cannot stand this one. It's really, really cheap. The story's and it's incredibly boring. There's not even anything to laugh at, save for maybe the Time Lash itself. I think they waste all their money on that guy with the half hippo face who barely even appears in it. He only appears like in the middle of part 2 and that's it. Revelation of the Daleks. One I think I need to go back to actually. But I do remember really, really disliking this one. You got it's really, really tonally confused because it's probably the darkest of the classic Dalek serials, but At the same time, you've got Alexi Sale playing this really obnoxious DJ. You know, it really can't make its mind up. Now we move on to the Trial of the Time Lords season with Trial of the Time Lords 1 to 4, The Mysterious Planet. This one's just naff. That's all I can say about it. Some people, you know, divide the Trial of the Time Lord season, you know, into 4 stories. Some it's one story. I kind of think of it as both in a way, but I'm not really a big fan of the trial sort of framing device. You know, it's just kind of the Doctor and the Valeyard whinging at each other. Mind Warp, easily the best part. The return of Syl, the departure of Perry. Yeah, I do really like this one, although it's not as good as Vengeance on Varos. Nowhere near as good as Vengeance on Varos. Terror of the Vervoids, which is one I don't mind, surprisingly. A lot of people really don't like this one, but I thought it was alright. And then finally, The Ultimate Foe, which is probably the only story that actually has sort of the trial sort of element to it, where the trial is actually a major part of the story. It's really, really convoluted, but as a story, it's actually alright. It's actually pretty decent. So yeah. So now we move into the truly underrated Sylvester McCoy era. I think Sylvester McCoy is a fantastic Doctor. So we start off with the infamous story, Time in the Rani. This is easily the worst story of season 24. It's just, I didn't mind like part 1, but I think it just got really, really boring. It's just naff, really, really naff. You can say that about the entirety of season 24, though. Upon watching season 24, it's not as bad as everybody says it is, but still. Paradise Towers, one I don't mind, surprisingly. I think this one really kind of has a good story to it and a lot of good themes, although I think it's kind of, its goofiness lets it down. I think if it was a little bit darker, perhaps, you know, they could have probably gotten a great classic story out of it. Delta and the Bannermen, the Butlands episode, or at least the one sort of based around like a fictionalised version of Butlands. I think I was a bit tired when I was watching this one because I couldn't get into it at all. Dragonfire, introduction of possibly my favourite companion, Ace. And yeah, this one, I know it has a lot of wasted potential, but if you kind of look past that, it's actually a pretty good story. Now we move on to the next Sylvester McCoy season with the fantastic, truly brilliant Remembrance of the Daleks. Possibly the best Dalek story since Genesis. I know it's a bit cliched to say that, but it's true. This one is absolutely fantastic. The Happiness Patrol. Normally I'm not a fan of like the hyper political stories, but I make an exception with this one. This one I think is really, really good. It had a lot of fantastic ideas in it. I think even if it didn't have that pseudo, like, that political element to it, you know, it could have still worked, you know, that theme could have still worked even if it didn't have politics attached to it, but it's still absolutely fantastic. I do really like this one. Silver Nemesis, the worst, easily possibly the worst Cyberman story of the entire classic era. This one, it just did nothing for me. And it's a bit naff for a Silver Anniversary special, because this was considered the Silver Anniversary story, when we all know the proper Silver Anniversary story is Remembrance of the Daleks, but, you know, I suppose it's Silver Anniversary, Silver Cybermen, what the hell. The Greatest Show in the Galaxy. One which I this is one of my personal favourites. I really do like this one. I know things like the title can probably put people off, and the fact that it's about clowns and stuff, but if you give it a go, it's actually a really, really good story, and actually has quite a lot of meta sort of themes to it, to the show, in its current state, because this was when Doctor Who was truly on its last legs. And now you move on to the final season with Battlefield, which tonally, it feels very, very different from the rest of season 26. I don't mind this one. It's great to see the Brigadier back for one last time, and it's okay. It's not terrible. It has some interesting ideas, like the Doctor being Merlin, because they were trying to reintroduce that mystery element, which had been kind of lacking throughout the entirety of the series. Ghostlight, this should have been 4 parts, because they cut it down to about 3 parts, and as a result it's a convoluted mess. But if you just switch your brain off, it's actually a pretty good story. Not a pretty good story, pretty good serial. The Curse of Fenric, one many fans praise. This one I think is pretty good, but it's not like the best thing since sliced bread. I think I need to go back to this one, because I think I just prefer like other Sylvester McCoy stories to this one. So, yeah. And then the final classic story, Survival. It's good, but I think this is one where people like erroneously call it a classic, even though it's not really. It's just a bit of a slightly underwhelming story, and an underwhelming story for the final ever classic story. Although this one was never intended to be a finale, because they didn't know the show was coming to an end. But, So now we're on to the final sort of stretch, and this is sort of like spin-offs and stuff. So first off, we have the TV movie. Paul McGann is an amazing Doctor, and it's an alright movie if you kind of switch your brain off to it. But I can see why people dislike it. It really, really doesn't work. It doesn't explain anything, and especially considering this was actually a backdoor pilot for a Doctor Who revival, which would have been a British-American co-production. Do I think that would have worked? Not really, but we can never know, because this film flopped in the US. The viewing figures were really low. The viewing figures were actually quite high in the UK, but low in the US. K9 and Company, the pilot episode to the failed spin-off. This one, it's not good at all, but it's honestly not the worst thing ever. It's just naff, really. More Than 30 Years in TARDIS, really nice documentary. Still an interesting piece, even if you already know even if you're pretty much a walking encyclopedia. 2 homemade discs, Dimensions in Time. I have got absolutely no idea why I made this. This is abominably shit. I think the only thing that saves it is the fact that it's very short. It's only about 20 minutes. But yeah, rubbish. And then the brilliant The Curse of Fatal Death. This one is fantastic, absolutely hilarious. This one, interestingly enough, was written by Stephen Moffat before the revival. And then we get to return to the official ones with Scream of the Shalka, which is the webcast. It's alright, just alright. An Adventure in Space and Time, a docudrama about William Hartnell's time as the Doctor. It is fantastic, highly recommended from me. If you're like a fan of the 60s Who and Doctor Who's beginnings, I would highly recommend this. I think you may have already seen it, but if you haven't, check it out. And then we get to the two Peter Cushing films, starting off with Doctor Who and the Daleks, a remake of the Daleks, the first ever Dalek story. This one, it's okay. It's okay. It's a well-made film and stuff, but I kind of think I prefer the TV story to this one. And then Daleks Invasion Earth 2150 AD. This is actually a pretty good film. I preferred this to the first film, and I actually preferred this to the actual television serial, The Dalek Invasion of Earth. This one I really think is well done. They actually, went somewhere in this one. It was largely shot on location, unlike the first Dalek film, which was largely studio bound. And then I've just got the Fourth Doctor time capsule, a really nice set right there. There's just a VHS Close Encounters that really doesn't belong with all this stuff. It's just there because it's a good divider. So behind there we've just got the empty boxes for the box set. So we have The Beginning, New Beginnings, A Time Flight Arc of Infinity, The Heat of Time, Beneath the Surface, K9 Tales, The Rescue and the Romans, The Trial of Time Lord, the E-Space Trilogy, the Black Guardian Trilogy, Dalek War, Peladon Tales, the Space Museum and the Chase, Myths and Legends, Chameleon Tales, Reg and the Cybermen, Silver Nemesis, Revisitations 1, Mara Tales, Revisitations 2, Mannequin Mania, Earth Story, Unit Files, Revisitations 3, Ace Adventures, the Legacy Collection, 2 HMV exclusive box sets, an introduction to the Third Doctor, which had Spearhead from Space, the Demons and the Time Warrior, and an introduction to the Fourth Doctor with Robot, Genesis of the Daleks and Pyramids of Mars. I'll just get that out of the way. And then I've just got the subcases for Power of the Daleks, the Macra Terror, the Faceless Ones, the View from the Deep, and my original copy of Enemy of the World, which has since been made redundant because I've got the special edition. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you got this far, then congrats. I will be linking an archived version of my original Doctor Who collection, because obviously, you can't view that on YouTube anymore. But you can, if you fancy torturing yourself, you can click on the link in the description and watch it there. And anyway, that is it for the moment. Until next time, goodbye.
I still see the X.